amid White House confirmation that agreements are underway to hold a meeting between Putin and Trump to discuss ending the war. For more, we joined from Brussels by Ramadan Abu Ghazar, Director of the Brussels International Research Center, and from Washington, Mr. Robert Patillo, an expert in the American affairs. Hello, Mr. Robert. We're so happy to have you today. Mr. Robert, in recent months, NATO have increased its military spending by about $5 billion. The question now is, what can NATO offer to Ukraine in order to end this ongoing war?
Well, NATO has the ability to, without invoking Article 5, provide security guarantees to Ukraine. The fear is that if Vladimir Putin is able to conquer all of Ukraine, he will then be able to move into Transnistria, the region of Moldova, which is Russian-speaking, and have a justification for incorporating and annexing that region. And then once you take Transnistria, you have a reason to take all of Moldova. And once you take Moldova, you have a reason to take Romania. And you have the domino effect from the Cold War reestablishing itself. So clearly, European nations, including the Balkan nations, as well as Poland, have every reason to fear a strengthening Russia on their doorstep. So it's very likely that even without U.S. support, NATO will provide ground troops to patrol the Ukrainian border as a part of any ceasefire agreement, as well as providing security guarantees for Ukraine, so that if Russia does come back again, as they have a tendency to, that would involve bringing in the rest of NATO to defend the sovereignty of Ukraine. We saw in the 1990s that Russia went into Chechnya, they left, they came back 4 years later in the Second Chechen Wars. We saw when they conquered Georgia, it took multiple attempts. They took Crimea in 2014, they came back in 2021. So the fear for Ukrainians is if they do not have robust security guarantees from NATO, then any ceasefire agreement or any resolution to this war will only be a temporary effort for Vladimir Putin to reload, restock, and come back even stronger in a couple years.
Also, the American president had announced that there will be a meeting soon between Putin and Zelensky. In your opinion, what are the outcomes might this expected from this meeting? Please slowly.
More than likely, Vladimir Putin is playing Donald Trump for time. We've seen Russia has lost over 500,000 to 1 million troops, depending on the estimate, during the 3 years of the Ukrainian conflict. Increasingly, we're seeing conscripts from North Korea, mercenaries from Africa and India fighting on the front lines in Russia. In addition to that, the Operation Spiderweb by the Ukrainians took out a significant amount of their strategic bomber fleet, including Tu-95s and Tu-22Ms. So Russia needs time to rebuild their military. The front lines have been seeing tanks from the 1940s and 1950s being taken out of retirement and used because of the number of vehicles that Russia has lost during the course of this war. So Vladimir Putin very much wants time to rebuild the military and to be able to fully push into Ukraine. So there will more than likely not be any significant outcome from any meeting between Zelensky and Putin. The military objectives of both sides have not changed. Ukraine is demanding the return of all their sovereign territory, including the Crimean Peninsula, which was lost in 2014. Vladimir Putin still needs the complete annexation of Ukraine because, one, they provide a crucial access to the Mediterranean through the Black Sea and the Azov Sea for Russia, so they can have a warm water port. Additionally, Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, one of the most fertile areas with regards to providing food to the Soviet Union. Russia has an inability to feed their entire population. They must completely conquer and annex Ukraine for the survival of the country. Therefore, any negotiated peace at this point in time would only be a temporary one, only enough time for Putin to be able to fully conquer the nation.
I would like you to please stay with me until I welcome with Mr. Ramadan Abu Ghazar, the director of the International Brussels Center. Hello, Mr. Ramadan. Today we can see the European leaders only a few days after Putin-Trump summit to discuss the Ukrainian file. What kind of guarantees that Europe could offer to Kiev right now? great news for you and for your guest. They had discussed many points as to offer this proposal to Kiev, but actually these proposals, Europeans need this proposal more than Kiev. They spoke about having a formula to get Ukraine benefiting from the term 5 in the NATO, to have this joint defense. But it seems that this is rejected by US. And I don't think Putin will accept this. So, the Americans are trying to determine the main points of these negotiations that Ukraine will benefit from having an advanced weapons, that Europe will pay for this. And I don't think this will consider a serious deterrence against Russia. Europeans, for example, France having to have a UK-French joint troops as a peacekeeping operation, whatever, but even that is still on the table. But there is no consensus in the NATO, there is no specific formula. The Secretary General of NATO see that these proposals by President Trump are unrealistic. There are also members of the NATO still hope to have Ukraine included in the NATO, and this is rejected by US. What we expect from the meeting of the military leaders is a discussion that continue for 10 days in order to have a formula or a draft for the security guarantees which Russia should accept in order to have a comprehensive peace deal. So I think Ukraine membership in NATO is very important. Sending European troops on the Russian borders is also important. Discussing security guarantees without having a goodwill, I think it's impossible. Mr. Ramadan, the question is for Mr. Ramadan. The Secretary General of NATO had mentioned that there are 30 countries discussing to offer security guarantees to Kiev. Of course, this according to the term 5 of the NATO. What does he mean by that? Do you think Ukraine will consider a problem or controversial issue between both Europe and the US? Actually, Europe no longer trusts the US in different fights, especially in the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Europe sees that President Trump is somehow manipulating the Europeans, trying to have this deal with Putin on the cost of European interests. So, the European leaders has been to Washington to support Zelensky. And if Europe trusts the American measures taken by President Trump, or even trust what President Trump is thinking about, we will not have seen all of these meetings in Washington, including the European leaders. Europe want to have serious security guarantees. There is a lot of mistrust in Putin. And also a new item. The American statements are no longer trusted by the Europeans. So the Europeans, even UK, which is not now in the EU, they need to have the American in the European camp as a member in the NATO and as a strategic partner. But Trump want to have both sides, the Russian and the Europeans. And the one who gets the victory is Putin. Putin, who was able to get this division between the Europeans and the Americans. And also Trump will be manipulated by President Trump. Mr. Ramadan, turning Max, the question is for Mr. Ramadan again. What are the main obstacles preventing a ceasefire now between Moscow and Kiev? How the Europeans view the potential settlement between Russia and Ukraine? The Europeans had asked to have even a temporary ceasefire as a goodwill or a good gesture. President Putin was able to convince Trump that it's not necessary to continue it's not important to end the war, and we can continue the negotiation until we have a comprehensive deal. On the other side, I don't think the Europeans right now in a situation where they could offer more flexibility. especially what is discussed is land swapping without having a serious guarantees. This is rejected by Europe and Ukraine to give any kind of territories to Russia, because this, from the European perspective, will push Putin to move and have military operations against other countries which are now member in the EU and was former members in a part of the Russian Federation. What happening in the Donbass to be given to Russia, this is completely rejected by the Ukrainian. The American president, who was campaigning to solve this problem in only one day, it seems that he came to invest in this war as the American policy is to manage the crisis, not solving them. I would like to thank so much Mr. Ramadan Abu Ghazar from Brussels. I'm back again to my guest, Mr. Robert. The question for you, Mr. Robert. We can see Europe seek to end the war right now. In your opinion, how this Ukrainian war have impacted the collective security within Europe?
I think this has broken the transatlantic alliance, which has existed since World War II, and forced Europe to make Europe great again, to borrow a phrase. We are now seeing most European nations not just meeting the NATO requirement of 2% of their GDP for military spending, but indeed increasing that to 5% for many nations. We're seeing countries pull out of the F-35 procurement program and trying to develop their own sixth-generation fighters, as well as purchasing things such as the Assault Rafale and even the Swedish Gripen to fill those needs. Also, we're seeing Europe economically pull away from the United States after quote-unquote Liberation Day. There's certain talks going on right now about Canada joining the EU and even creating more economic ties between the EU and China and other manufacturing hubs, cutting the United States out of the agreement. Essentially, the rest of the world has decided to figure out how to survive in a post-American world. This is not new. Before World War II, the UK, Great Britain, was the hegemonic power of the world, and they lost that because of 2 world wars, and the world adapted. What we're seeing now is Europe trying to become that hub of international trade, of international commerce, and of military power, pulling away from America, which appears to be a dying democracy.
Thank you so much from Washington, Mr. Robert Patillo, expert in American affairs. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was our pleasure to have you today. And thank you for speaking on a regular basis.
Anytime.